Marilee Lee Bruszer was a young woman with dreams too big for the small town of St. George, Utah. Bright, full of life, and with the kind of energy that made people notice her the moment she walked into a room, Marilee seemed destined for a future she could barely imagine. But in 1978, at the age of 20, that future vanished as suddenly as she did. The day she disappeared was unremarkable on the surface. Locals went about their business, kids ran through the streets, and the desert sun baked the streets and rooftops. No one could have predicted that a young woman with her whole life ahead of her would vanish, leaving only questions and heartbreak behind. When Marilee was reported missing, investigators combed St. George, knocking on doors, questioning neighbors, friends, and acquaintances. Every corner of her life was examined. Yet despite their efforts, there were no definitive leads. No one saw her leave. No one knew where she was going. No one had reason to suspect that her disappearance would become a decades-long mystery. Her family, desperate and terrified, clung to hope. They posted flyers, made phone calls, and searched tirelessly. Every day she remained missing was a day filled with unanswered questions and fear that perhaps something terrible had happened. Yet as months became years, the trail grew colder, and the world seemed to move on without her. Meanwhile, law enforcement was hampered by the limitations of the late 1970s. No national databases for missing persons, no DNA analysis, and no digital records meant that investigators had to rely on sketches, witness statements, and incomplete leads. It was a time when many cases simply faded into obscurity. Marilee's disappearance became one of those haunting stories. A bright young woman gone, leaving behind a family who never stopped searching, and a community left with a mystery they could not solve. Years passed. The search continued, but the trail grew faint. Hints emerged of unidentified remains found in Utah, but none could be confirmed. Marilee's case slipped into the shadowy corners of cold case files, a name whispered in hope, remembered in grief, and left unresolved in the annals of law enforcement. Yet Marilee's story was far from over. Decades later, advances in science and technology would bring her name back into the light, proving that even the coldest cases could eventually be solved. Her life, her identity, and her story were about to be reclaimed. For years, Marilee Lee Bruszer existed in a liminal space, her family remembering a daughter, sisters longing for their sibling, friends clinging to the possibility that she might still return, and investigators maintaining a cold case file that grew thicker with dust and frustration. Every lead that emerged seemed to fade as quickly as it appeared. The late 1970s and early 1980s were challenging for families of missing persons. Without a centralized database, cases rarely crossed county lines, and communication between agencies was slow and unreliable. Marilee's family sent photos, descriptions, and personal details to local law enforcement, desperate for answers. Each time they were met with the same agonizing response: nothing new. Meanwhile, rumors and speculation swirled in St. George. Neighbors whispered, friends theorized, and the mystery grew in the imagination of a town desperate to make sense of it. Some suggested she had run away, though her close family insisted that was impossible. Marilee was too rooted in her life, too connected to her family and friends. Others feared the worst, though no one could prove what had happened. In the background, law enforcement continued their painstaking work. They followed leads that led nowhere. Witnesses who might have remembered crucial details either moved away or passed on. Photographs of potential sightings were analyzed, compared, and ultimately dismissed. Every thread seemed to vanish into a cold, unyielding void. But the world was changing. In the early 2000s, cold case investigations began to benefit from advances in forensic technology. DNA analysis, once a futuristic concept, became a powerful tool for identification. Cases that had gone unresolved for decades suddenly became solvable, provided that physical evidence had been preserved. Marilee's case, preserved carefully by law enforcement, became a candidate for these new techniques. Investigators submitted whatever biological material remained for testing, hoping that even a fragment of DNA might provide the breakthrough that had eluded them for nearly 40 years. The work was slow, meticulous, and fraught with frustration. DNA profiles were compared to national databases, genealogical resources were consulted, and investigators began piecing together family trees, tracing descendants and relatives in hopes of locating a match. Every lead required careful verification. Every connection had to be confirmed before moving forward. Finally, after decades of silence, a pattern began to emerge. Using genetic genealogy, detectives identified potential relatives and cross-referenced their information with Marilee's missing persons report. Small hints turned into promising leads. Hopes, long buried, began to resurface. By 2015, nearly 37 years after her disappearance, the pieces fell into place. The DNA analysis confirmed what her family had always feared and always hoped. The unidentified remains discovered years earlier were indeed Marilee Lee Bruszer. Her identity, lost for decades, was finally restored. Her family's relief was profound, mixed with sorrow for all the years they had spent without answers. For the investigators, it was a triumph of persistence, science, and dedication to the principle that no missing person should be forgotten. But even with her identity restored, the questions remained. What had happened to her in 1978? Who was responsible for her disappearance? And could justice ever be served for Marilee? When Marilee Lee Bruzzer's identity was finally confirmed in 2015, the relief for her family was immense, but it came with a weighty realization. For nearly 4 decades, they had grieved a mystery. Now, with her name restored, the reality of her death hit even harder. She was gone, and the story of her final hours remained shrouded in shadows. The investigators who had reopened her case turned their focus to understanding what happened to her in 1978. They pored over the old files, missing persons reports, witness statements, and photographs. They revisited old crime scenes and interviewed anyone connected to her life. But after so many years, much of the trail had grown cold. Memories faded, people moved away, and key details had been lost to time. One of the most challenging aspects of Marilee's case was the lack of physical evidence linking her disappearance to a suspect. Unlike modern investigations, forensic science in the late 1970s had limited tools. DNA testing didn't exist, and fingerprint databases were rudimentary at best. Investigators had to rely on circumstantial evidence, witness recollections, and the few clues that had survived the passage of time. The discovery of her remains decades earlier provided some answers, but also deepened the mystery. The condition of the body suggested foul play, but the evidence was insufficient to identify a perpetrator. It was a frustrating paradox. Her identity had been restored, but the key to justice remained elusive. Despite these challenges, the case became an example of how modern techniques can breathe life into cold cases. Forensic genealogists, using DNA from Marilee's remains, were able to confirm her identity and connect with her surviving relatives. This breakthrough not only gave closure to her family, but also demonstrated the evolving power of science in solving decades-old mysteries. Marilee's story also highlighted the human toll of unresolved cases. Her family's grief, stretched across 37 years, illustrates the enduring impact of a missing loved one. Every year without answers magnifies the pain, the questions, and the longing for closure. Families often move through life carrying invisible weights, hoping against hope that someday, somehow, the truth will surface. With her name restored, Marilee was no longer just a statistic. She became a real person again, a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone whose life mattered and whose story deserved to be told. Her identity gave her humanity back. and her family finally had the chance to honor her memory in a way they couldn't for decades. Yet the lingering question haunted everyone involved. Who was responsible for Marilee's disappearance? And would they ever be held accountable? The answers remained hidden, but the resolve to uncover the truth only strengthened. Marilee's journey from disappearance to identification is a powerful reminder. Even when the trail grows cold, time, persistence, and science can restore hope. Even after Marilee Lee Bruzzer's identity was confirmed in 2015, the most pressing question remained unanswered. What had happened to her in 1978? Investigators faced the frustrating reality that decades had stripped away nearly all traces of her final hours. Witnesses had aged, moved, or passed away, and memories that might have once led to answers were now faint, unreliable, or lost entirely. Law enforcement turned their attention to the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. They reviewed old police reports, family testimonies, and any known activities leading up to the day she vanished. Marilee had been a young woman who loved her family and her community. She wasn't known to run away. That made her disappearance even more alarming. Her case also highlighted the harsh limitations of 1970s investigations. At the time, missing persons reports were often treated as routine unless there was immediate evidence of foul play. Cross-jurisdiction communication was slow, and unidentified remains were frequently misfiled or left unconnected to existing missing persons reports. Marilee's story slipped through these cracks, leaving decades of unanswered questions. The discovery of her remains years earlier had provided critical information. While the condition of the remains suggested foul play, investigators lacked the forensic tools to identify a perpetrator. Unlike today, where DNA and advanced pathology can reveal even subtle clues, 1978 offered only limited leads. There were no DNA profiles, no national databases, and no digital footprint to follow. Modern investigators hoped that revisiting the case with fresh eyes might uncover new information. They reached out to former law enforcement officers, neighbors, and anyone who might have remembered unusual occurrences around the time of her disappearance. Some recollections offered minor leads, unconfirmed sightings, or strange behavior in her community, but none were conclusive. Despite the uncertainty, Marilee's identification sparked renewed attention. The media coverage brought her story back into public consciousness, and her family could finally speak her name publicly. Advocacy groups for cold cases highlighted her case as an example of both the failures of the past and the potential for modern science to restore identity to long-lost victims. While the killer remained unknown, Marilee's story sent a powerful message. Even after decades, victims can be remembered, identified, and honored. Her identification became a symbol of hope for other families still searching for answers, demonstrating that persistence, modern technology, and attention to cold cases can eventually restore justice, even if it cannot always deliver retribution. Her name was restored, her memory reclaimed, and her story told. But the final chapter, justice for what happened to Marilee, remained unwritten. In the end, Marilee Lee Bruzzer's story is a testament to patience, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of truth. After disappearing in 1978, she remained a mystery for nearly 4 decades. A young woman lost to time, remembered only by those who loved her, and cataloged in cold case files that grew heavier with age. But in 2015, modern forensic science finally restored her identity, giving her a name, a face, and a place in the world that had long forgotten her. Her family, after decades of grief, could finally mourn openly, remember her life, and honor her memory. The relief was profound, mixed with the heartbreak of all the years lost, all the moments they would never share with her. Yet even with answers about her identity, the questions about her disappearance remained. Who was responsible? Why did it happen? Could justice ever be served? Those answers may never come. Still, Marilee's story is far from one of defeat. It is a story of hope. The hope that no case is truly unsolvable, the hope that victims can be remembered, and the hope that families, no matter how long they've waited, can finally receive closure. Her identification is a beacon for investigators working cold cases today, and a reminder that even decades-old mysteries can be solved with persistence, technology, and unwavering dedication. Marilee's life, now restored to her name, stands as a tribute to every victim who was once forgotten, every family waiting for answers, and every investigator determined to never let a case go cold. Her story reminds us that no person should be reduced to a statistic or a file number. Every missing person has a story, a life, and loved ones who deserve answers. If you believe stories like Marilee's deserve to be told, and that victims' voices should never be silenced, then please like this video, share it so her story reaches more people, and subscribe to help us continue shining a light on cases that have waited far too long for justice. Your support isn't just a click, it's a way of honoring Marilee and countless others who can no longer speak for themselves. Marilee Lee Bruszer may have been missing for decades, but now, thanks to modern science and human determination, she will never be forgotten.